It is Sunday afternoon in front of the White House. You're here with Chance, who's an interesting person, who's going to be here for the whole week, right?
I'm actually going to be here until the United States Department of Justice acknowledges that the department denied to me equal protection under the law starting in 2012. The background there is one of my former employees committed a string of felonies, crimes, other crimes against my former company. I documented that fact. One of those crimes included mail fraud. So when the officer who received the case decided not to do anything about it, that was actually a crime in and of itself against the U.S. government. Therefore, I made contact with the United States Department of Justice, and that's when the department denied to me equal protection under the law. So, as a result, about 3 months after making contact with the agency in the form of hundreds of pieces of evidence sent to the agency by way of the United States Postal Service, return receipt required, I renounced citizenship using Facebook. That was October 15th, 2012.
Was that successful?
It's an interesting case there. That post actually was on my Facebook page until the spring of this year when I began being interviewed by a gentleman that I believe is a member of America's intelligence community. But to rewind a little bit, after the felonies were committed against me, which ended up destroying my business, but before I went out of business, I was lucky enough to get sued by the maker of Camel cigarettes, R.J. Reynolds Tobacco of North Carolina. Now that's case 1:13CV210, Reynolds Innovations Inc. v. Addison et al. In the Middle District of North Carolina. So I wrote a legal brief that ended up stopping the company from getting into my bank account, which goes like this. The U.S. government and all resulting jurisdictions, in the absence of a human claimant to constitutionally protected rights, does not have jurisdiction over my person because I can prove that the U.S. government's guilty of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and consistent violations of the constitutionally protected rights of the residents of the lands under its control, and I can do this using evidence produced exclusively by the U.S. government. I have the human right not to be forced to participate in a criminal enterprise, and especially not one which so thoroughly violates my morality. So I wrote that brief and sent it to the court, but before I did, I sent out 300 copies to pretty much every media outlet in the state of North Carolina, just to make sure I would not be ignored. Thereafter, I went ahead and posted that online before I sent it to the courts, and that's when I believe in America's intelligence community became involved in my life, because for 10 days following my posting of that legal brief, I was not able to get into my email or my online banking. So I went ahead and sent some advice to the NSA through my Facebook, which was still working, coincidentally. And
was this before Snowden's revelations this happened?
This was after Snowden's revelations. It was about a month after Snowden's revelations, so I'm one of the first people to use that information in federal court. So as to this date, I've not yet had a response from the Middle District in regards to the lawsuit brought against me by R.J. Reynolds Tobacco. And I have been interviewed multiple times by the mainstream media, and none of that content's ever made it into any broadcast, and I believe that's because the U.S. government keeps alerting the media to the fact that this is still an active federal case, and as such, you can't discuss it. Bullshit. They just don't want people to know that a little nobody like me shut down a Fortune 500 company in federal court after that company violated the federal rules of procedure to bring me into court in the first place. Further, one of the unique portions of my legal argument goes a little bit like this. Rule 103 subdivision C states clearly that any information that exists in the public sphere is therefore usable in your activities in court. So what I did was I argued that because the U.S. government cannot prove that this bill is worth anything more than the cost of manufacture, it is therefore made more valuable with my website attached, because on my website it's likely you'll learn something useful to you about the law, it won't cost you anything, and it don't generate any revenue from it. So what I did was I sent a sample stamped bill to 2 different federal jurisdictions where I'm a defendant against 2 different tobacco companies, and I let the courts know that I've stamped 200,000 bills, and I went and bought money orders, making sure they got into circulation, and I was paying my former employees every payday using stamped bills. So as a result, I've not heard from the court for the Middle District in North Carolina with regards to case 1:13CV210 Reynolds Innovations v. Addison et al. That's pretty much the last I've heard from him so far. Now I have authored since then a challenge to the corporate charter of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco, with the basis therefore being that the company's executives have knowingly sold to the public a product which has no known health benefits, but when used as directed, invariably harms and or kills the user. Further, they have a long history of tax evasion and misuse of the legal system, having committed multiple felonies that's well documented in the public space.
Right.
So that challenge for their corporate charter is now pending in the Middle District. I sent an updated version of that in July, and that's available on my website, chanceprose.com.
Okay, let me ask you this. So in the best case scenario, what could happen for you in terms of...
I'm going to disappear eventually.
Well, no, that's not the best case. In terms of your battle, what would be the best case scenario? How would you win? What would happen for you to win?
Well, technically, I've already won in my mind because the $80,000 debt that was generated by a felony on the part of a member of law enforcement, I was able to stall R.J. Reynolds long enough to settle that debt. So I consider that a victory.
Okay.
I also consider it a victory for me to be able to be here teaching people about the law and teaching them about what I'm calling my right. Sovereign brief, essentially. Right. It's the rights of the sovereign entity.
Right, that's
so
good.
I actually made the term sovereign entity to be applied to any person who has, upon reaching the age of majority or any point thereafter, renounced U.S. citizenship based upon the criminal acts of a public official committed against them.
And have you actually renounced your citizenship?
I actually did on Facebook. I did not comply,
on Facebook, but I mean,
I did not comply with the standard.
Okay, so you're still a citizen by the books.
No, I'm not.
You're not.
I'm not a U.S. citizen.
You're not.
I don't consider myself to be a citizen at all. No.
But by law you still are, though, right?
No, not at all. This is still an active federal case.
Okay.
So as long as I'm living consistently with the arguments that I provided to the courts, I don't believe that they would be able to force me to be a citizen.
Okay.
Because I can prove that the U.S. government's guilty of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and consistent violations of our rights.
Yes.
So they cannot force me to participate as a citizen. That would be a violation of my human rights.
Right. Well, okay, let me ask you this. In the coming election, anybody you see with any that might interest you, like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, anybody?
Well...
Or you think they're all just corrupt in one way or the other?
I've kind of dropped out of expressing any opinions on elected officials or upcoming elections because of what I'm here to do. Strictly, I'm trying to get from the U.S. Department of Justice a printed apology, 50 newspapers, front page, 16th page ad, I get to write it. That's all I want.
That's
I
what
lost a multi-million-dollar business and all I want is a goddamn apology. And what do? They keep harassing me. That's it.
Now, was this in North Carolina you lost the business?
Well, it was my business within Washington State, but I was brought to court in North Carolina. The company must have thought that that would be some sort of advantage to them, being as that's their home turf. And the judge, whoever decided to let this case proceed, did allow R.J. Reynolds Tobacco to violate the federal rules of procedure to get me into court because I was never issued a cease and desist.
Right. Now, outside obviously the political system is corrupt. You all know that. Outside that system, are there any groups that you support or you would endorse?
I would endorse nobody at this time.
Nobody.
I wouldn't want to stain them with my name.
But you have a lot of ideas that are shared by...
Absolutely, and they're all for free on my website. I published a book in 2011 which actually discusses pretty much exclusively federal policy. Within that book, I also presented an idea for the reform of the federal tax code, which utilizes existing shareholder laws to force companies to take a 0% tax rate. The kicker is that according to company size, they would have to re-employ a certain percentage of their workforce being American citizens and pay them enough that they would become federal taxpayers. Because obviously, we need a lot of the programs that the federal government provides today, and revenue needs to be generated to support those programs. So the real problem is, in terms of the federal budget today, real wages are falling. We've had real wages fall in not inflation-adjusted terms, but actual real dollars that people earn are lower today than they have been previous. And with the economy depending upon 70% of its GDP coming from consumer spending, that's a threat to the nation's security. So in fact, the tax code as it stands today is one of the greatest problems that this country has. Because as a side effect of tax reform, there's a lot of other problems that would be solved.
Okay, Chance, thank you very much. You're a fascinating person, very interesting, you have a lot of energy. You look good, which is a good advertisement for your message.
Well, you know, walking 14 miles a day and flipping the bird at the White House 5 hours a day has something to do with it.
And what's your diet? Are you a vegetarian or anything like that?
Actually, I had some health issues that have led me to eat nothing unless it looks like it came off a farm, and I only drink water.
Okay, so you're very progressive.
But I smoke a shit ton of weed if I have it.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. So you're very progressive in many, many ways.
Yeah, in some ways, but I would say fiscally conservative in others.
Okay.
You know, definitely, you know, in terms of my proposal for tax reform, offering a 0% rate to corporations, that's pretty friendly to a lot of people that call themselves conservatives, financial conservatives.
Okay.
They're anything but in terms of what they're willing to support.
Okay.
When you look at the fact that the Department of Defense is spending somewhere between $600 billion and $800 billion a year, and very ineffective spending at that. You know, because at the end of the day, you get a lot more out of humanitarian assistance than you will out of making enemies with bombs. That's for sure. So I'm not an isolationist by any stretch,
Right.
but I am definitely against feeding the military-industrial complex, and that's what we see today. Is
Yeah, sure.
massive donations being made to
Yeah.
members on both sides of the aisle, and
Yeah.
as a result, conflicts perpetuate themselves, essentially.
Right.
You know, where you have weapons manufacturers selling chemical weapons, the precursors for chemical weapons to Syria, with full well knowledge of the NSA and MI6.
Yeah. So you're conscious that you're aware of all that stuff.
I study a variety of policy. I don't
Yeah.
know everything there is to know about the federal government,
Right.
but I'd sure dare anyone to take me on in a debate regarding the drug war, for example, because
Right.
I consider it my constitutionally mandated duty to resist any law which can be proven to have weakened the national security of the United States of America.
Okay.
Therefore, I consider it my duty to smoke weed anytime I have it anywhere.
Okay, all right, that's good. Your duty, all right, that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's an opportunity to educate people.
Oh, I see.
You know, for example, I educated a judge in March 2014 in her courtroom, Adams County Court, and she, as a result, committed perjury just to get me out of court. You can actually hear that from her courtroom on my website.
All right, thank you very much, Jens.
Thank you,
I wish you
sir.
good luck with your quest.
Much
And
appreciated.
anybody who fights and goes outside the grain and against the tide should be applauded and encouraged.
And be prepared to take on America's intelligence community as well.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.